Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, October 20th, starting right about noon, which is not a terrible time to start. Um, yeah, seems like we've got an update here. For the accountability section today, I don't really have a lot to say because I mostly was busy yesterday with non-YouTube stuff and also the Amazon Prime Early Access sale, which I got a couple of things on sale, but certainly these Prime sales definitely are um, a lot of work, to say the least. Like, they go about 48 hours when they really only really needed to go about 24 hours at most, and honestly they don't even need to go that far. Like, there's a different way they can present their sales over the course of like noon to midnight for 12 hours one day, and maybe you do that on a Saturday, um, and then heck, even if you went from midnight to noon on like a Monday, so maybe you do it on Sunday and then Monday and do that 24-hour period instead of midnight to midnight for a 48-hour period. And the second 12-hour period really should just be, all right, this is the other side of the world, here's the exact same sales, because the sales really do repeat quite a bit. Here we have another Duel Links advertisement. This is getting ridiculous. It's just how many of these really have to do with Duel Links. Now we've gotten 2 or 3 advertisements. And do we really need an update that says, hey, we've got some new accessories you can buy, and we have a new structure deck you can buy? Like, because this all comes at the same time. That they really should be staggering these announcements if that's what's going to happen. But yeah, as far as what I bought like some USB-C cables that were actually on sale, and a edger trencher, an electric plug-in edger trencher that was on sale. I went through everything that's in my wish list. I just on Amazon, which I always have things there that I'm planning to buy in the next couple of years, and it did have a marker that said like early access, and here we have just like a whole bunch of the same announcements there. It had a label as far as things that would have had their prices different, but even in that case, some things that were labeled as being on sale, as I went to Camel and checked the history, they've been on sale cheaper at other times. Nothing that was blatantly marked up and then said it was on sale, but undoubtedly some of the lightning deals, which really all you can do is look at lightning deals otherwise, I imagine undoubtedly a lot of the lightning deals are in that aspect where they have been marked up and then they're just being marked back down, and maybe they're $1 cheaper than they have been in a while, but they're not to that level of really being discounted. But yeah, I got like a waterproof Bluetooth speaker, which really is a waste, because the ceiling fan I want to install also has a Bluetooth speaker, which is also on sale, but the waterproof Bluetooth speaker I got instead is like $15-20, whereas it would be $75 even at sale to get the one that would install into the ceiling fan permanently, and I have to have the actual ceiling fan installed first, and that's a project that just I haven't gotten around to hiring an electrician to do, like, or a handyman to do, because it's more working over my head than I really want to do myself. It's not particularly that complicated, but so like here we have a structured deck, but inherently, even if you have 3 copies of this, buying 3 copies of the structured deck to get 3 copies of like this super rare is probably worth it. Or like, so yeah, it's a shame that we even have 1 copy of this. What's also a shame about certainly this structured deck though is we're still probably buying cards that can't be dismantled for crafting points. So like, after buying this 3 times, you won't be able to purchase it anymore. And so now when we say show number owned, like we should be able on this ultra rare to have an ultra rare extra, but it almost certainly isn't that case unless they've changed the rules. Dismantle all extra cards. Well, I'll be darned. That does seem to have allowed me to dismantle 1 of those extra cards. Okay. So structured decks are a better deal than I thought they were. But I was going to get all 3 of them. Anyways, you would be hard pressed to have an argument not to get all 3 of them for 1,500 gems to be guaranteed just a certain number of extra super rares and ultra rares. That really solves that really is probably the best deal in the entire game. Like, we have 6 copies of this card, this ultra rare. So there's still something weird there, but we only have 3 copies of these, which probably means the 1 extra that could be dismantled was not gotten through a structure deck or something else. But yeah, what I mostly bought, I'm just buying this just to own everything. Really, it's just a waste of gems. Mostly with my irrigation system hoses being 10 years old and just all being on the verge of bursting, I spent probably close to $450 to $500 on PEX pipe, tools to cut PEX pipe and merge PEX pipe splitters, and all the and sprinkler heads that can be buried in the ground, and all of that is really just like, okay, this is an emergency situation. I needed to buy this even if there wasn't a sale going on. So that was the vast majority. I bought a new keyboard and mouse because there's definitely some wonkiness with my keyboard and mouse, and I've moved over to Microsoft keyboard and mouses, wireless keyboard and mouses, to try something different, which may not work at all because I didn't even really look to see what the Microsoft mice have as far as buttons. So if there isn't a side button to or programming software in particular to toggle the magnifier on and off, I'm going to be really screwed there. I might have to set up a middle mouse click shortcut, and I guess I could learn to use that. That's fine, but again, you have to be able to actually program that. Alright, how many cards included in this pack do I own? Seems like I have a decent amount of cards in this pack already, so this doesn't really feel like a candidate for purchasing cards. Yes, I don't have all the ultra rares and super rares, but I don't think we're quite at the point where I would desperately chase after that. I almost wonder if this is not a new pack, or if this has become a situation where in less than a year on Master Duel they have just cycled around and we're getting selection packs that we've already seen. Let's see, how many cards of these do we own? Very little. So there is a candidate here, but there's kind of a bad situation here also, and I don't know if there's a great reason to try and buy 10, 20, or 30 packs here and use the remainder of our gems, or wait a week and have another 10,000 gems or 2,000 gems. That way when we start opening secret packs we can be closer to that point. There was a notification here around special duel link reg. Link reg will be held on the following date. Let's see. Show your adaptability using special duels. How is a special duel not a festival? I guess that's a question. Let's go over here and see if we can see it. And I imagine there's not... One thing they didn't update all at once was any more solo stuff, I imagine. I feel like there was a gate here and then the gate symbol went away. Yeah, regulation duel. Let's see what that means. If you reach a certain rank in Ranked Duel Season 9, you will start at a designated rank in Special Duels. You've earned rank up rewards up to your starting rank for the event. Alright. So, it doesn't seem like I could play today. Today is the 12th. It starts on the 13th. Let's see. So if I want to make a regulation duel, I suppose can't have any of these cards. Like, what are the rules around this? I mean, this deck is somewhat doable. Still, it would just center around like editing the deck out of the Zodiac part and just playing the Tri-Brigade part, which is not the best concept. Alright, edit this deck. So, you drop that, you drop that, you drop that, you drop that, you drop that. Then you add anything we've got extra of, which in my case may be nothing. Could probably try to find more Tri-Brigade cards. Or you just leave the deck as it is. Okay. Then what you would want to do is just say, hey, do we have another one of these? No. And would these even help? Not really. And just trying to see if we could increase cards. Alright. So get rid of that one, and that one. And then it would just be tri-brigade. Like if I type in tri dash brig, let's see, tri-brigade should be right. Okay. We have that. Make a tri-brigade standoff as cards, not a crazy idea. This card's not a crazy idea. I have 3 of these and 3 of these. And see, that seems like that's it, so just gonna see if we can eliminate all these 2 remaining cards and just have a full tri-brigade deck. I could craft some cards, obviously, but there's no reason to do that. Yep, that's a good deck, I think, to start with. So we're now set up for this regulation duel, link regulation, which what the link regulations really are, I don't know, but effectively this is the awful setup where you are effectively just playing ranked between October 13th through October 27th instead of just playing ranked. Which, yeah, we're still a gold. Like, we don't have a ton of time. I don't have a ton of time. I say we far too often, but yeah, I just don't have a ton of time around around the idea of playing extra Yu-Gi-Oh just for the hell of it, and playing 2 ranked ladders at the same time in any game is pretty ridiculous. I don't think those 2 cards actually synergize. Yeah. But yeah, pretty much since I didn't actually do much of anything other than shopping on the Prime sales. Inherently, if this is a special Prime members early access sale, I can't help but suspect that that is implying heavily that the next Black Friday sale is going to have the exact same deals, and I kind of question if that's really the case, that we are just going to see the exact same deals on Black Friday. And it will be fairly hard to even tell if that was the case. So, yep. That was probably the wrong guy to summon or draw at that point. So I suppose at 20 minutes in, we should just start to jump to the video game news. I'm gonna have to pull it up a little bit at a time here because I wasn't that prepared. Let's see. The game with stolen artwork from Destiny Child is still around. Still waiting for Marvel Snap to come out to try to play that on day one. Yeah, that is definitely a point also where if I was going to be really ambitious, I would try to live stream like Marvel Snap on day one and play it and get as many views as possible on that, particularly since I know I'm unlikely to stick with the game. Like, odds are very, very low that I would stick with the game. The one more day. What? Why did that not work? Oh. It's broken. Let me just fix that. The web peak. As my computer decided to move all of the display numbers around again. Yeah. Let's try that again. Yeah, one day until the Guilty Gear crossover with Destiny Child happens, which really for me still I think feels mostly like it's going to be a case where you're just going to be asked to spend a lot of the premium currency to do loot box draws, which it is a gacha game, so that's not super surprising. Yeah, but it is pretty much just going to be, I think, loot box cards. Loot box draws, and then there might be some other events around it, but for the most part I don't expect there to be much of anything. Alright. Let's go ahead and just activate this ability. Show this to the opponent. Then go ahead and just banish one of those. And then normal summon that. Which then activates that ability. Which then will let me add that to the hand. Which lets me normal summon that. Which I think we're safe in doing that. And then that adds that to the hand. Which at this point, I don't know. I don't think either one of these cards actually does as much, so it's probably best just to do these. Add that to the hand. Alright. Okay, I guess this will work. Activate this to return one of these. We'll just summon that one. Go ahead and activate that. To banish his card. But noticeably, we're not actually special summoning, so him discarding Max C didn't actually help him. And at that point, I have all 5 monster slots full, so if he destroyed everything, I'd be really screwed. But if I can do a devastating amount of damage here, he may just decide to surrender, or he may just be so far behind. I don't think this quite gets him down to 0. But next turn. The YouTube handle stuff is not rolling out as fast as I would like, and so it definitely feels to me like they are cheating in favor of bigger YouTubers first and foremost. That people like PewDiePie almost certainly are getting the notification to say, hey, do you want to change your handles? And then they're giving people like PewDiePie a decent amount of time to decide and respond to that before people with just 1 million subscribers and get a handle. And then so I imagine there's several classes and waves, and by the time they get down to people like me with less than 500 subscribers, most of the handles will probably be taken out. And so that's going to be fairly infuriating, particularly in my case, because the handle I would like is short enough that I can imagine all 4 character long handles will be taken before I am even given a chance, or somebody else will have just taken it when they really don't have what I would feel would be a legitimate claim to the handle. Because there is really nobody else that goes by the name Rydo, R-Y-D-O, that I can know of. There was, like, when I search YouTube, the thing that comes up under my channel is either a Australian ride-sharing, like Uber service that didn't seem to succeed on YouTube as far as their video views go, and a very, very old like YouTube video that has maybe a decent amount of views, but not anywhere as many as views as me. Speaking of amounts of views, like my best viewed video is at like 89,000 views, and I kind of would like to push it to 100,000, but it's a completely irrelevant video too, and so I actually wouldn't do anything to push it. It's a how to set up Hearthstone deck tracker video, so it's effectively a how-to video when my channel isn't about making how-to videos. If I just wanted views, I would have shifted to my entire channel to be how-to videos, but it also didn't really lead to a lot of subscribers. If I had gotten even 1,000 subscribers from 89,000 views, I would have been ecstatic. But honestly, I probably got less than 20 subscribers from that one specific video, although that's hard to really tell because who knows how many people didn't view that video and then get suggested some of my other videos. I guess he didn't know that that ability. or didn't care. It's still fairly slow to get a victory here when playing ranked. But whatever. We have to do it. Apparently OBS 28.1 Beta 1 is now available. Which, maybe at that point, that's a good symbol to think about 28.0 or whatever 28.0.4 or 5, whichever bug fix version they had of it, because there was a lot of bug fixes. I need to upgrade at some point. I can't just put it off forever. But I also really would like to make sure the plugins that I'm using now all actually work over that major change to version 28. But yeah, that's certainly something I'd like to upgrade. Now, there are supposed to be other sales that are kind of happening at the same time as this Prime Day sales. Walmart has like an arcade 1-up Pac-Man Partycade for $99, which is like a wall-mounted arcade system that, or a very awkward looking like table-mounted arcade system. Part of the problem with it though is that you really are going to have your face right up to the screen, and it really is not ergonomically designed well. The controllers are not slanted in any way, so your hand on the joystick is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and because it's a Pac-Man game, there's really not quite enough buttons for what you would want if you're going to try and modify it and have it play other kinds of games. Like, I don't mind it saying Pac-Man on the outside, but you would want to be able to have at least 3 buttons, probably closer to 8 buttons, or 6 buttons. But the form factor is intriguing. I still wonder though, if it isn't better to build something like that yourself. Yeah, and I do feel like it, particularly if you're at a wall, you need to be able to lean back and stand further back. Of course, kids' arms are going to be shorter, and so that's going to affect the height and the angle at which the control panels should be tilted forward. But it should be tilted forward by at least, I'd say, 5 degrees, not flat at a 0-degree tilt. And the more practical solution definitely is still to have a have just like a control stick that sits on the table or in the lap, and oops, I wasn't paying attention there. But yeah, have a control stick that wirelessly connects to a puck that is plugged into a TV, so you can control many factors there, not having multiple monitors in a room, extra monitors in a room for no reason, and being able to just sit back. Alright, so I'm going through the Video Games Chronicles articles here, but a lot of these are just redundant again. Seems like that keeps happening. Modern Warfare 2's PC trailer promises 500 plus customization options. I guess if that's what you're looking for, that's good news. If that's not what you're looking for, which is very possible, then that's probably bad news, because then it says that there is a lot of focus and production resources put into making customization options. I heard somebody ridiculing somebody on Twitter, or somebody who put out an article that was indicating that skins for a particular game were taking months and months to develop, when if somebody is taking months and months to develop a skin, they're probably not, to develop those specific skins, they probably aren't working fast enough. There's an Archer recurring joke where they go, "What are you hourly?" When anybody's moving slower than they like. Which, speaking of Archer, I mostly ignored the Archer in a Coma Season 1, and mostly ignored Archer in a Coma Season 2, which sets it in a different time frame. And now I'm on to Archer in a Coma Season 3, where they are in space. And each of those series, while they're labeled seasons in Hulu, they have title cards at the beginning that really make them feel very much like spin-off seasons. So yeah, even if Archer at this point ever did get back to, well, I'm at season 10. If at some point between 10 and 15 Archer gets back to being a spy show, you're talking a minimum of 3 years in which you would have had to watch these other Archer concepts, which it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. If one season had been him in a coma and there'd been a couple episodes for each concept they wanted to play with, one season 10 being an Aliens ripoff, basically, the season before that being a Indiana Jones ripoff, and the season before that being a noir detective movie style ripoff. Had those three concepts been one season and each got 2-3 episodes, even 4 episodes for that concept, that would have been much more palatable. But it's no wonder that I stopped watching Archer after those seasons, is that it just was completely different, and it doesn't seem like there's a real reason for it, because it's not like it's the characters rediscovering themselves and their personalities, and it's like, oh, in this different setting they would be the exact same characters that you've grown to like and love, or that it's playing around with concepts or characterization so that you could see what how those characters would interact with each other in a different type of scenario, really. Because while the animation is the same of the characters, the writing of the characters is completely different. So yeah, it's just a completely different story. And that's something you can only do in animation, I imagine. Well, not really. You could do it in live action. You could have a show where the characters are written completely different and act completely different. But it wouldn't be consistent, and that's the problem, is that these Archer and Nakoma seasons have nothing to do with the Archer series up until that point. And the Archer series up until that point had already been fairly fast and loose about changing what the narrative in the story was. The only thing that is slightly consistent is that the same robot guy, Barry, seems to come up fairly often as a bad guy. So the only theme you can really take away from the Archer series is that Barry at some point will become a robot somehow, and then or a cyborg, and then he'll become the arch nemesis of Archer. Which, that's just not enough, really. Anyways, though, before I started talking about Archer, yeah, the complaint in the criticism against somebody claiming that they had spent a lot of effort on the skins of some game, and I'm being very nebulous here because I wasn't paying much attention to it, really is highlighted in the fact that a lot of the skins were just color palette swaps. So it was the exact same, like, models and textures and fabrics. It's just now it's in blue instead of red. I think it was possibly Angry Joe, because I opted to subscribe back to Angry Joe. I may unsubscribe from him. In a lot of ways, I've never really had a long-term relationship with Angry Joe in the sense of watching his content. His reviews of video games I don't think come quite frequently enough, but he kind of has this podcast, and in my desperate need to find something to replace the Bombcast, maybe I will just listen to the Angry Joe podcast and see if that really works or not. I watched his podcast because he was talking about the Hellraiser movie, which, yeah, maybe if I found somebody that talks about movies and video games and TV and just multiple forms of media, there'll be more balance, and they won't get into that situation like Giant Bomb gets into, where they end up having very little to say about video games because they're doing a bunch of other things instead of playing as many video games as they really should. Also, in the case of Giant Bomb, though, Giant Bomb has a ridiculous amount of people, so there should be somebody who's playing a different kind of game and has something different to say about a different kind of game, instead of just playing all the same AAA games over and over again, or having nothing to say otherwise. Back to the Video Games Chronicle news, though. Platinum thinks the hiring of a Nintendo veteran can take the company's relationship to the next level. So this is definitely blatant cronyism at a certain point. So they've hired a CEO called Atsushi Inaba. I think he was the guy that worked at Nintendo. But maybe they didn't. Maybe they hired someone else, and the CEO is just being quoted here. And that's a level of confusion that you have to be careful around. The CEO does say their partnership with Nintendo is very important. I think at a certain point that's probably the case because Platinum Games has developed itself to be dependent on Nintendo as a publisher for funding. Whereas Platinum Games would have to become probably a self-publisher to publish games like Bayonetta, and by being a self-publisher, they probably won't have that extra funding to then make games like this one, which I forget the name of it. It was Astral something. Astral Chain. And apparently at some point they made Star Fox Zero. Of course, what will happen here is that if Bayonetta 3 comes out and then Nintendo says we have no interest in anything like a Bayonetta 4, and by the way, we don't really have an interest in publishing or funding the development of any game from you, that relationship is done at that point. And I wouldn't be super surprised if that's exactly how it's going to go. as we just don't know Nintendo to be that predictable in any way. Let's see, somebody at my door. This is probably, if I was to guess, deliveries of Prime Day packages. Yep. Big old Prime Day van driving away. That is one thing that I think I need to point out too, is that this Prime Day sale has gotten a little bit sneakier in that they are better at shifting and shipping packages out as quickly as possible, because there was a $15 Bluetooth speaker, waterproof Bluetooth shower speaker, and then there was a $11 one, and I bought the $11 one on a lightning deal, and then I bought the $15 one on a lightning deal first, and then several hours later there's a lightning deal for the $11 one, so I bought that one also, and then I was going to go back and cancel the deal because that had worked in just earlier this year's Prime Day sale. Like, that worked fairly well, is to just grab lightning deals and cancel the order later. And certainly I could still go in that direction and have just returned the package for a refund later. That's probably not really worth it if I'm just returning a $15 product, but yeah, because that's just like a lot of extra work. It takes an hour out of your day, and if an hour out of your day and an extra mile of gas is not worth $15 these days. But yeah, so I ended up just saying, well, fine, you've already shipped it, so you can't cancel the order, so just cancel the more expensive, the cheaper one. So I ended up not saving $4. So yeah, that's a shame, because that trick was working fairly well. And if you were going to buy a ton of stuff on this Prime Day sales, which honestly that's how this would probably work the best, is that if you just bought a house, if you just moved out of living with your parents or something and had a ton of money, so that's a very weird situation, or if you just got a huge promotion and raise and bought a new house and you just needed a lot of extra stuff that you haven't fulfilled the need for those things, and I need to emphasize the word need here, not just want. Getting involved in one Prime Day one time is probably your best bet. Just ordering just like a ton of stuff, $2,000-$3,000 worth of stuff, and then returning or a bunch of stuff. If you buy duplicates, it might work that way. But even at that point, the things that are on sale in the lightning deals, or the things that are just on sale in general, are not likely to be things you need in most cases. So yeah, you are still going to just have that weird experience of having to struggle to find things that are justifiable to buy. Unfortunately for me, it still really is a situation though where having a Prime Day, a Prime account makes sense. Like, I over the year order perishable things and replenish things enough to justify it. And Prime Video sucks, yes, but it does have an occasional thing worth watching. The whole Hulu plus Disney Plus plus ESPN bundles are changing very soon, and like getting the right combination there feels like it would be fairly expensive if you want to make sure you get Hulu Plus so you're with no ads, and Disney Plus with no ads. And then, like, I don't think I really care personally about ESPN Plus, but the bundle may force you to pay for that too. There definitely is a bundle where you're paying like $70 a month between those three bundled services, though, and that is a lot of money, certainly. And I don't know if I really believe that Hulu Plus with no ads and Disney Plus with no ads makes quite a good enough experience to counter the idea of having cable, because I just don't think Hulu Plus alone with no ads is offering enough of the primetime new shows. Like, there's still a high chance that you're going to have some desire to get like Paramount Plus or Peacock Network, or I don't think Fox has one, but yeah. And the comparisons are definitely easier to make between Hulu. I could have canceled that, I think, but whatever. Like, the comparisons are easier to make between Hulu and cable TV than Netflix and cable TV, because Netflix never really sold itself as actually offering anything close to cable TV. The shows on Netflix are completely different, and so yeah, Netflix always felt like it was in addition to some way of getting cable TV or over-the-air TV. Anyways, back to video game news. We were looking at Platinum Games saying hiring the Nintendo veteran was a good move. Yeah, the person they hired was Yamane. He has joined Platinum as the chief broadcast officer, or chief business officer, probably. He worked at Nintendo for 20 years, 7 as the general manager of the licensing department, so he had almost certainly a fairly close relationship with Platinum Games in the first place. But yeah, working 20 years at Nintendo probably doesn't get you very high up in the management scale at Nintendo, because let's just be honest here, Shinji Miyamoto has been there since the beginning, and he may still not really even be a manager of anything. There's not a lot of upward momentum in Japanese companies where the CEOs work as the CEOs until they're deep into their 80s and 90s, and then when the CEO dies, they just appoint someone who's deep into their 70s or 80s to replace them. It would be interesting to see Japanese people, like, they are embracing the idea of moving to other companies, which is something that they just would not have done in the past. And I'm fairly certain they wouldn't have done in the past. Can I activate this? But yeah, the Japanese haven't really embraced the idea of making their own companies and creating new businesses. So while Japan is a fairly small country, it is also a country that really doesn't have a lot of small business when it comes to businesses that actually are mentionable on a global scale, which small business I guess never would be mentionable on a global scale, so it's probably somewhat of an unfair way to describe it. Like, obviously there's a lot of small bars that are owned by like one guy. In Japan there's probably way more of that, small ramen shops and bars that are owned by one person and their family has owned it for hundreds of years. But I guess what I'm saying is there aren't any medium businesses where Shinji Miyamoto could have 10-20 years ago left Nintendo and gone and made a different company, and in that different company he could have made some competitor to Mario that actually mattered. Like that just didn't happen. And even now, when Kojima, when Kojima, I believe it was Kojima, left Konami and formed his own company to do Death Stranding, the only way he really succeeded at doing that is by completely leaving Japan, starting a company in America, having a whole bunch of American friends and Hollywood friends, really being very focused on doing something different. Yeah, the thing that still gets me about this article, I need to move on from it though, is Star Fox Zero. The fact that there is a Wii U game called Star Fox Zero that was ported to the Nintendo Switch, and I did not know that exists. Which, in fairness, I haven't used my Switch anywhere enough to justify getting deep into trying to find more games to play on the Switch, but in part that is definitely a problem, is that I just don't know what games really are on the Switch. So it does get kind of ridiculous that I have a Switch in the first place when I can only think of maybe 4 or 5 games I'd even want to buy or play. But in a lot of ways I do need to probably buy one game to motivate me to finishing Breath of the Wild. Because yeah, that and the Mario game that I've pretty much given up on is the only game I have. There were some digital download code bundles for some Switch games, and that's slightly surprising. And there were some Pokemon games that are slightly surprising. I should have played this actually. So yeah, Pokemon Shining Pearl and Shining Diamond, or Brilliant Diamond, I think had some sales around that. But those definitely aren't the Pokemon games I'd want to play. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says a new Switch system update improves stability and updates controller firmwares, which controller firmwares probably are a good update. Oh yeah, there's some 8-bit though controllers that are sort of on sale as far as the Amazon Prime. The thing there, of course, is that the 8-bit controllers are fairly marked up to begin with, so them being on sale still has them at like $50 for a controller that you would have preferred in the old days to be closer to $25 or less when on sale. But yeah, video games are getting more expensive, controllers are getting more expensive. There is no drop in price that we've seen, even though the amount of people with less money is just ever increasing. I think we can play this. Hopefully. Hopefully that didn't screw me over. Apparently the location of the Bluetooth audio menu in the system settings has moved. Screenshots can be taken using the capture button, while Nintendo Switch Online application is found on the Switch home menu. Video capture is not supported. General system stability and enhancements. Let's chain with this. Alright. Unless this bird lets me summon it again and then activate its effect again, I think I may be screwed here. Let's do this one. I'll be darned. I actually made it. I'm paying too much attention to playing the game. I need to, I think, opt to probably take a break, if not think about actually just stopping here. Okay. I'll try the bird again. That didn't do anything. That's what I thought. Alright. Shatter that. Direct attack there. In the turn. Apparently somebody named Oatmeal Dome did some further findings into the update, saying that the handling of Ethernet adapters was moved to its own dedicated OS module internally, which I assume it's running on some kind of Linux. But I don't know if the Switch is running on Linux or not, really. Pro Controller Bluetooth firmware was updated, various error messages were added and changed. A pop-up was added for attempting to exceed the max headphone volume when the limiter is on. A swear word database has been updated for mainland China, which almost certainly things like Winnie the Pooh might be in that swear word database. Time zone database has been updated. Australia and New Zealand privacy law text has been updated. Speaking of Bluetooth audio, I've been trying to help somebody get hearing aids that allegedly have Bluetooth in them, but seemingly it is all so programmed that the whole hearing aid thing is a scam. Unfortunately, some people do need hearing aids. That you can't get around that. Some people definitely do need them, but it is very much a car salesman like mentality where you're seeing these quote-unquote doctors who probably do have some kind of medical degree but really have just been boiled down into being car salesmen. And much like car salesmen, they're really just trying to sell you the most expensive model, and they don't really know how the equipment works. Certainly hearing aids aren't giving you some kind of like DTS or Dolby Atmos type settings or setup like that. There's just kind of nothing like that at all. Although if the United States ever did allow over-the-counter hearing aids, you might start to get things like that, and then we might start to see a weird overlap between what people, the prosumer and the professional audiophiles out there, want to have and be able to hear in headphones or even in-ear monitors compared to what hearing aids are doing. But I have found so far with these Audicon custom hearing aids that by default, when they're not programmed at all, they go into a phone receiver mode if you put on any kind of headphones and turn off. Just completely turn off because they think you picked up an old-fashioned telephone handset receiver and stuck it to your ear, and their default thought there was to just turn off and stop doing the thing that you absolutely would want them to do at that point, which would be continue to amplify things. I could see maybe a thought that if hearing aids and a handset receiver were together, it might be a little too loud and there might not be a way to turn down the audio on a old-fashioned telephone, but nah. Turning off is definitely not the right response in almost any scenario like that. And Bluetooth in these Audicons seems to be only enabled after they've been programmed, if they've been programmed to be enabled, and inherently the car salesman doctor, I don't think, has the intelligence or knows how the software works to have enabled it. So the headphones for the person I'm trying to help get set up have been programmed now, and they are actually doing something where they really weren't helping at all before. They were making something louder but not the right frequencies for a deaf person to actually use them. There is now they are programmed and working, but they still do not go into any kind of Bluetooth pairing mode, unless it's just the fact that I have both a Samsung 20 FE and a Samsung 21 FE, and the FE parts of those Samsungs are completely missing pairing signals, which is hard to believe, really, because you would see something. It would be different if it says can't pair to this person, but I see this device, but for it just not to show up. The only other thing I could possibly do is have a spare iPhone, which I don't, and see if maybe it's just programmed in some weird way to directly connect to iPhones, and you have to change it to have it compatible with Android phones. But while it does have this whole cell phone app, the app I don't think is particularly good, looking at the reviews, and it needs to be able to connect and pair before it can do anything, which just creates a catch-22 where you're still having to go back to the doctor to have him try and program it before anything else happens. And that is something that would be fixed almost certainly if they ever did actually allow over-the-counter hearing aids instead of just over-the-counter hearing amplifiers, which you can get that. And in a lot of ways, I don't know if the technology is really much better to have a hearing aid versus a hearing amplifier. It depends very much on what frequencies you are actually not able to hear if you're deaf. And then, of course, there is the inherent problem where if a person has been deaf and they've gotten used to the world of being deaf for a long enough time, as soon as they start hearing things like the rest of the people in the world have been hearing things, they are likely to start complaining and going and just saying, "What's that sound? What's that sound?" Or, "Boy, it sure is noisy in this place." And it was like, no, duh. Very often, deaf people are the source and cause of a ton of noise around them because they don't realize how much they're turning up TVs and how much noise they're just making in moving around and doing things. So you get this unfortunate slight lack of appreciation from somebody you help, which that's pretty much true for a lot of situations, for old people and disabled people in general, is that there is they get used to being disabled in some way, and then is unfamiliar and unwanted to be back to a normal life. Yeah, but yeah, I would definitely not recommend Otacon hearing aids if you have a choice, but your pick is definitely going to be based on what somebody wants to sell you, and what kind of hearing aids you actually want as far as the shape that goes in your ear, more than the technology inside of it. They very much will probably sell the technology as if it's magic, in the same way a car salesman will try and push technology buzzwords as if it's magic, because they're just hoping that you don't know what they're saying, or they don't know what they're saying. A great example of that in car salesman is like if they're pushing and promoting that a car has all-weather tires, that may be great if you actually need all-weather tires, but maybe all-weather tires, I don't even know, do all-weather tires really work if you're far north and you need a winter set of tires and a summer set of tires? Or are all-weather tires just kind of moderate temperature tires? And I shouldn't have even started another game here. Because I think, for the most part, if you are far enough north where you're going through a lot of snow, you probably need to switch out to winter tires and potentially put chains on your tires. And if you're close enough to the equator where it's hot, then winter tires or all-weather tires probably don't really mean anything either. Yeah. And that's, since I personally don't have a lot of knowledge about cars, that's pretty much all any sales point that a car salesman tried to tell me. My level of knowledge on that would be really to that level, where it's just like, oh, I don't know. I'm just going to look at the price. But yeah, if I tried to actually ask the car salesman, or in this case, a hearing aid doctor, like what is the frequency responses, or how many bands of equalization does it have, or what is the decibel difference. The guy I was dealing with didn't seem to really know or want to say. Like I didn't ask all those questions, but yeah, he definitely wasn't interested in pointing out any of that at all. And I've never known any audiologist to really be interested in pointing out any of that at all. Alright, I'm really rambling here. Back to video game news. Sonic Frontiers will get a free Monster Hunter DLC shortly after launch. Not lunch. Maybe that was a slip. I didn't. Yeah, I could go for lunch right about now. But I'm not going to. Immediately, I read that as they know Sonic Frontiers is going to struggle, and that they are going to use their much more popular series now of Monster Hunter to try and bolster Sonic Frontiers. Of course, that is because I and the general gaming community are not super hot on what we've seen on Sonic Frontiers in the first place. If people were super hyped around Sonic Frontiers and it looked awesome, then I would, for the exact same announcement, be saying, well, it seems like Sega is really going to double down and try and support their game as best as they can. Man, I keep running into this situation where I'm either getting extra daily quests in the middle of streaming, or yeah, that has to be what that's doing, because destroying a card 5 times feels like something I should have been able to have done at least once, and inflicting damage to your opponent for 8,000 damage feels like something I should have done. Now we're back to duel and solo mode, which, yeah, I might be safe enough to do another solo mode episode if I wanted to. I may not bother to get to that point, since they did unlock all of this extra stuff. But if I spent the gems on a secret pack that unlocked because I did solo mode, then I wouldn't have the gems to open up the new selection pack. And it's much better to do the selection pack than it is the secret packs. Alright, let's, even though there is an argument to play some more, let's really just burn through the news. Overwatch 2 servers down for some as Blizzard removes 2 heroes temporarily. So Overwatch 2's launch is still pretty awful. PlayStation shipments were reportedly up by 400% last month. PS5 supply appears to be increasing as Christmas approaches. I have seen what feels like an indication that that is a accurate guess or accurate perception, because the number of PlayStation 5s in particular selling in Japan in the past few weeks have been very high too. So yeah, just because PlayStation 5s are getting made doesn't mean that the whole part shortage is completely done. In a lot of ways, Sony would have had a lot of buying power to rent out manufacturing plants and get their devices produced to the point where medium-sized and small-sized businesses may have had their orders canceled still to meet that demand. And honestly, I just don't know if there isn't an extra 500,000 people that are either sick or missing / dead in China as far as all the workers. I don't know if there is ever going to be a accurate population count of any country going forward, we're going to have to get down to the point where governments, or maybe not even governments, maybe independent agencies are straight up doing spy satellite thermal scanning just to get a general idea of how many people actually are in a country compared to the population people are claiming are in the country. And for just the part shortage aspect, you could probably do that fairly now. You could see how many factories are lit up and how much a heat an electrical plant is producing, or even measure how much garbage is getting thrown in the atmosphere in China, since they have a lot of coal plants making the air poor quality, and that might tell them how much electricity they're producing, which might tell them how many people are actually in the factories manufacturing things. Of course, it feels fairly sleazy to only talk about part shortages and Chinese basic slave labor being smaller than you'd like for your little PlayStation 5 toys. We really should remember the idea of human rights issues and the fact that a lot of the electronic gadgets we get around the world are being made with basically slave labor, and it's not a good situation. I don't know if there's a great solution to that either, like 100% automation so it's all robotic. Sounds nice, but then it just has a lot of Chinese people starving to death because they don't have a job. But who knows? Yeah, and that's as far as the solution as I can even start to think of as far as a solution, and there's no real solution there. Moving on, back to video games. 69% of all physical games sold in Japan last month were Splatoon 3. So obviously the Nintendo Switch and Splatoon 3 is a major success, where all other physical games for the entire last month only made up 31% of the total sales. That is a pretty big number. Now, arguably though, as far as you start to think about like what physical games were sold in last month otherwise, it's not like there was really a lot. Let's see. What are they saying otherwise? PS4, PS5 versions of Dragon Quest X, Rise of the Five Tribes offline, and the Earth Defense Force 6 on the PS5. As far as non-Switch games. And that they don't really have, they're not really breaking it down any further. Switch overall dominated the last month. Although in the last week or so of this new month, we have seen a decent amount of PS4 and PS5 games on sale in Japan, selling well in Japan. Microsoft launched a new controller, which, interesting, they call it Lunar Shift. It's just a color palette swap, but there is definitely a noticeable thing here in that they are definitely getting away from the colored button prompts, and now it is just going to be white or black on the button prompts. This is a pretty awful color in my opinion, as far as just white things on a controller. Controls really should be black to hide as much dirt as possible. But yeah, this might be the first time we have anything other than black as far as the rubber on the top of the thumbsticks. But even if that's the case, I'm digging really deep to have anything to say about a different colored controller. Apparently, Microsoft and Sony paid millions to bring Arc games to their subscription services. Which, okay. They probably didn't get their money's worth paying millions for that. But the competition as far as subscription and streaming services was certainly high and is still certainly high. Meta, aka Facebook, has acquired the studios behind Iron Man VR and Resident Evil 4 VR, which, if anything, I guess that just probably says that there won't be any other Resident Evil games made into VR by this company. And that's probably for the better, because I don't think VR is ever going to succeed. I don't even know what Iron Man VR is. It came and went that easily. So, Camouflage and Armature Studios have joined the Quest maker, as has Twisted Pixel. So it's two different companies. So really, this should have been two different articles. The Resident Evil 4 VR release was either the first or the second game to remake Resident Evil 4 in a while, and it was one of the games that started to make changes to Resident Evil 4 as far as the whole let's recontextualize this and get rid of the cheesy Ashley elements, which it mostly is the cheesy Ashley elements that they're trying to get rid of. The idea of Ashley hitting on him at the very end, and her being the president's daughter and wearing this weird skirt outfit. Like, I don't know if there really are any other elements I can even think of in Resident Evil 4 that they felt the need to change. Maybe. Oh yeah, there was like a point. I think it is all Ashley related. There's a point where the Spanish guy, who doesn't even play a big role in the story, makes a joking reference to Ashley's breasts, and yeah, they may have erased that. I think the exact joke is he looks at Ashley and he goes, "I didn't realize the U.S. president equipped his daughter with ballistic missiles," which it's not an appropriate joke by any means, but I don't want to live in a world where censorship is so rampant that you can't make a sleazy, inappropriate joke every now and then. Most jokes are inappropriate, and that's why they're funny. Remember, Ashley is like college age, so it's hardly like they were making a joke about a 16-year-old or younger. Moving on, because I don't want to get into a censorship rant quite yet. We'll have plenty of opportunities, I'm sure. Xbox Cloud Gaming is coming to Meta Quest. Players will be able to connect an Xbox Pad to their VR headset and play Game Pass titles. Which, these games aren't equipped to be played in VR, so you can even see from this, you're really just having a curved, warped screen window in VR. Here's a picture of Iron Man VR. I did see something on Reddit saying that it's kind of ridiculous how much their Meta and the CEO of Meta in particular is trying to push VR and make VR a thing. And it probably was a reaction to these announcements. Modern Warfare 2 Premium DLC will reportedly include campaign content next year, which that sounds like that's a new turn of events that's probably not going to be well received. It's also been claimed that a Greatest Hits multiplayer map will be released in 2023. After 14 months, Square Enix is finally closing Final Fantasy VII's Battle Royale, which is interesting because I did not know there was a Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale at all. Must have been a mobile game. Final Fantasy VII The First Soldier was released on iOS and Android in November 17th, 2021. I wonder if it never really got any push or promotion in the West. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case here. Am I seeing a gray bar at the bottom of all these articles? That might be something I need to block if I can. Take-Two CEO says Microsoft acquiring Activision would be a good thing for the industry. If this makes their business more powerful, that's good for us, says Strauss-Zelnick. I think we had already talked about this story. That Take-Two is taking the other side of the argument, probably because Take-Two themselves would like to acquire more companies, and they don't really see a major threat to their business model by Microsoft acquiring more companies. I wouldn't be surprised if Take-Two is on the list, which is probably a fairly long list, of people who are also being courted to be acquired and merged with Microsoft. Microsoft is kind of in this waiting pattern to try and acquire Activision Blizzard and get approval for all of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are several other companies that have fewer offices in fewer countries, or there would be less approval needed overall to acquire somebody. I could definitely see a scenario where Microsoft is staying silent right now, but talking secretly in the background to acquire 3, 4, 5 other companies as soon as the Activision Blizzard acquisition either falls through completely or gets approved. And if it does get approved, I wouldn't be surprised if those 5 other acquisitions get announced completely, and in some cases there's only the US government having to approve them, or for some reason the companies are so small that even the US government doesn't really have any way to disapprove the mergers. That's certainly how I would do business if I was trying to do a merger and become a much bigger company, is to make myself look like a small company as much as I could for the most difficult acquisition, and then flip the script on everybody and acquire a bunch more people and become a huge company. Let's see. Microsoft has accused the UK regulators of adopting Sony's complaints over Activision Blizzard deal. The UK CMA recently expanded its inquiry into a proposed acquisition. Let's see if we can get a real comment here. They're criticizing the regulator's decision to expand its inquiry, which probably is a mistake. Like, there's often this need to feel like you need to publicly push back on anything and often it comes from people sending out requests for comments or doing interviews, when you really should just say we currently don't have anything new to say about the acquisition other than what we've said other ways. So they're not giving us a full quote. They say the concerns are, quote, misplaced, and claim that it's, quote, adopts Sony's complaint without the appropriate level of critical review. And see, now down here we're getting more quotes, but not the ones that you would have wanted to see that they had, quote, mined. And at the end of the day, this is more just mudslinging than anything else. It's not really video game news at a certain level. I still heavily believe that the UK will approve this Activision Blizzard acquisition, even if the UK didn't, unless that was the first domino to fall, and several other countries didn't approve the deal either. What more than likely I assume would happen is that the offices of Activision Blizzard that are in the UK, that the UK has any authority over, would simply remain Activision Blizzard or be named something else, and everybody else would still be acquired. So Microsoft wouldn't get the UK offices, but they'd get every other country's offices, which that might be a deal breaker, or it might not. Apparently, Blizzard is compensating Overwatch 2 players with in-game items after launch issues, which probably isn't enough to make people happy. Sony tells I think that's supposed to be regular Call of Duty players, are likely to... No, it is. Sony tells a regulator that Call of Duty players are likely to switch to Xbox even without exclusivity, which that's hard to prove, certainly. That's kind of an extreme assumption, certainly. If you have been playing a PlayStation 5 and you're used to a PlayStation controller and you're playing something that's fairly competitive like Call of Duty, I don't see a large percentage of people jumping over to Xbox for that. Not unless the Xbox controllers, Xbox consoles start working with PlayStation controllers. If they had their own drivers for that, then yeah, maybe more people would jump over. But also you're assuming then that people are abandoning their PlayStation 5s, their trophies, their whole gamer tags just to go over to Xbox. And for one game, that seems unlikely. If that was going to happen, it would be in a transition between whatever the next Xbox Series 2 is and PlayStation 6. I could see a lot of people jumping over and saying, I'm not going to bother to get a PlayStation 6, I'll just go and get an Xbox Series 2 instead, because all I'm playing is Call of Duty and nothing else, or very little else. But inherently, if nothing changed, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a significant number of people jump from a PlayStation to an Xbox Series 2 instead of a PlayStation 6, because even with Call of Duty, PlayStation 5 is not getting enough exclusives or games to really justify having a PlayStation 5 over Xbox. They just have not really been competitive in a lot of areas, and the lack of forward thinking is coming back to bite Sony in the butt, I feel. Multiversus new update adds Stripe from Gremlins and a Halloween event. I think it's a little weird, though. There's a lot of text here as far as changes. It's a little weird that this is what they're showing as Stripe. It almost feels like they're trying to soft launch the idea of a Gremlins cartoon, because that's really what this looks like. Like, Stripe did not look like this because Stripe was a puppet in the movies, a live action puppet in a live action movie, and for him to be animated is a little weird. Now, another thing that's going to be weird, and I imagine this was the same issue already, is that Warner Brothers, which is doing Multiversus, I think it's Warner Brothers, yeah. On top of being acquired by AT&T and just being through this very big changing of the guard and changing of their focus, they have the Harley Quinn adult cartoon. and they've just announced a dark-skinned lesbian Velma adult cartoon that a lot of people are complaining about. But we shall see. I imagine those characters aren't coming to Multiverses, because Multiverses is definitely trying to be more family friendly than that. But it would be weird if they did come to the... And there is almost certainly already a Harley Quinn in Multiverses, but it's probably a different Harley Quinn than the way she's animated in the adult cartoon. Otherwise, that's going to be weird. But I don't know where Warner Brothers, particularly in their animation departments, are going. And they can't just make a Smash Brothers based on a bunch of characters that are decades old. They need to have some newer cartoons coming out and have some cross promotion to say, hey, we've got this brand new Warner Brothers cartoon on Cartoon Network airing, and so we're going to put this character that nobody's heard of, or maybe it's not Cartoon Network, maybe it's Nickelodeon. But yeah, they need, as an animation studio, to remember they are an animation studio, or Warner Brothers has an animation studio. Warner Brothers isn't just an animation studio. And then they need to use Multiverses as a way of cross-promoting both ways. Currently, it's still very questionable as far as what they do have, though, whether it makes Multiverses really make sense, because it is all over the place. Yeah, they already have Morty here, so if they're adding Rick and Morty in the Multiverses, it does come off as at earliest should be a 16 plus game. So we may very well see this new Velma character and Harley Quinn from the Harley Quinn adult, I think it's an HBO show up. The Multiverses Hollywood event, non-pairs must play 780 plus games in 30 days to unlock everything. This is a bigger issue, certainly. I should have talked about this article first, as to the problem with Multiverses, in that it is fairly obviously way too greedy. The idea of playing 780 games, let's just run some quick divisions. That would be 20 days plus 180, which 26 games every single day without fail, somewhere around that, 26 plus games without fail. Players who buy a premium skin will still, however, need to play 390 games, so it only cuts it in half. Yeah, and if it's 26 plus games in 30 days for this, 26 plus games every day for 30 days, then 13 games every day doesn't make a lot of sense. And I know Smash Brothers, a Smash Brothers type game probably isn't that super long. Let's say it's just 2 minutes per match, which is probably longer than that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5 to 10 minutes. Some of the Smash Brothers games go on forever. But let's go with 5 minutes. 5 minutes times 26. You're talking somewhere around 2+ hours every day of gameplay. It just gets ridiculous. And certainly that is an example of what I feel when I play Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and they have events and they want you to play a ton more. And it's certainly what I feel when I play a lot of free-to-play games, is that all of a sudden you become this employee who is working for this digital skin instead of just playing to your own heart's desire and enjoying it. FIFA 23 enjoys a record-breaking launch with 10.3 million players in its first week. I feel like today I'm saying a lot of uhs and ums, which is a shame because I was actually fairly proud of myself for seemingly not saying that as much. But I think it probably is just based on the day and what time I woke up and how energized I am. A new PlayStation 5 update improves system performance, according to Video Games Chronicles. PlayStation Star's loyalty program has launched in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. October's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics titles have been announced. This includes GTA Vice City, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Castlevania Lords of Shadow, which Lords of Shadow is sort of worth playing, I think. Even though it kind of doesn't go anywhere. This is the PlayStation Plus Extras and Premium games are available October 18th, and yeah, this is the Xbox Game Pass competitor. When you look at it, there is a distinct and obvious lack of variety. Having 4 or 5 Dragon Quest games all released at the same time doesn't work if you don't care about Dragon Quest games. Having 4 or 5 Assassin's Creed games all released at the same time doesn't work if you don't care about Assassin's Creed games. In particular here, they're releasing Odyssey, which maybe people want to play, but there's considerably less interest in any of the Chronicles games, or Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered, or Syndicate. Same thing here. As far as Yakuza games, 3 Yakuza games all released at the same time doesn't really make sense. So, if you don't want any of those games, you're down to playing something very old like Limbo or Castlevania Lord of Shadow. Noticeably, these are PS3 games too. So, really, they are just porting or releasing already ported versions of PlayStation 3 games, because the PlayStation 4 and 5 can't actively have backwards compatibility. A Diablo-like called Undecember could be your next RPG addiction. This is a advertisement from Video Games Chronicles that you can tell by the flagged bookmark here. Alright, that moves us to Gamatsu articles. Wild Hearts hands-on preview and gameplay if you want to check that out. Several more videos here. It seems like there's a lot of hype trying to be built up around Wild Hearts, which I'm not sure if that's ever a good thing, to try and build up massive amounts of hype. This week's Japanese game releases are, let's see, Dragon Ball The Breakers, Kamiwazi Way of the Thief, and RPG Time The Legend of the Right. As far as physical and digital, as far as digital only, there is a longer list, but not particularly the longest of list. We may still be feeling the effects of Golden Week, or this may very well have been Golden Week, as to why there might be slightly fewer digital games. Having 3 physical games come out in a week is fairly average. And I think honestly we also are just getting to a point where it's, as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll see less and less Japanese focused games, or games specifically getting released in Japan, or games just generally being released anywhere as we approach Christmas. There still should be some level of build up though until at least Black Friday. Sonic Frontiers free Monster Hunter collaboration DLC has been announced, and it seems like it's a fire pit and this armor, which I wonder if the fire pit part of this doesn't even really connect so much, and it's just the armor. At a certain level, I wonder if this is a case where, by default in Sonic Frontiers, you're going to be cooking meat on a fire pit for some reason. Which, that seems weird for a Sonic game. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yabai, the Hinokami Chronicles, has yet another DLC character, although in all fairness, it has been a while since they've announced a new character, new DLC character. I don't know who this character is supposed to be. Daiki? Yeah, I don't recognize it, her per se. They're going a little extreme for the Hinokami Chronicles as far as a lot of side boob and small bikini bottom. But at a certain level, it does kind of feel like Kimetsu no Yabai is pointing the anime manga of Demon Slayer as it evolves into its sequels, like Kimetsu no Yabai is going further and further into a more mature more mature story, showing maybe more skin than what I think the series kind of started off with, where it was more of an action fighting game. It's still going to have, or it's an action fighting anime, it's still going to have a lot of action and fighting in it, certainly, but yeah. I think there's going to be less emphasis on weird looking guys with a tiger head as a character. Let's see. Side-scrolling platformer Pom Pom, The Great Space Rescue, is coming to Switch on October 25th. Do we have a trailer here? Yes. Do I want to watch a trailer here? Not particularly. I see what it is. And always, this is the kind of game that I would like to potentially play if I was nostalgic for playing a Game Boy game. This is the kind of game that actually would have never actually played on a Game Boy or Game Boy Color, but feels something like that type of game, in that there is a level of wholesomeness or lack of polish in it that is acceptable, because if you think of it as a portable like Game Boy type experience, but wouldn't be acceptable if it were animating it to look like a AAA 3D platform game. And the kind of cutesiness here with a mouse swinging around. There seems to be a lot of gimmicks also in this platforming game, where you're pausing time and adding platforms for him to land on. So this as a game feels like it is actually more of a unique experience than your average platformer. Gotham Knights has a cinematic launch trailer if you want to check that out. I'm going to say no to that one. The Valiant Last Man Standing trailer is available if you want to check that out. I probably should say that for pretty much every trailer, is just not watch them. Phantom Abyss is coming to the Xbox Series game preview in October 20th. Let's see what Phantom Abyss is. I do want to check this out because I don't know what kind of game this is. Well, this looks like one of those platforming Infinite Runner games. I think this is one of the ones that was more of a almost battle royale, in which it was multiple people all playing and racing each other at the same time, which does take what is a kind of repetitive concept and add a new element to it. Because in the past I definitely have seen these danger infinite running platforming type games come out and then not really work for your average player and only really work for YouTube streamers. Yeah, apparently that lady, I saw more videos of that lady at TwitchCon who jumped into the 1 inch of foam ball pit and broke her back in 5 places. She updated a tweet saying that there was like, yeah, more injuries were found, no doubt. And apparently there had already been injuries before that injury occurred. And so as soon as there was like a injury in any case, there needs to be a shutdown and a safety evaluation, and everybody needs to rethink what they're doing, and not just push forward and keep doing the same thing. Total insanity. The fact that Twitch didn't have somebody on the floor that saw an injury or heard about an injury and just let the booth people probably run and do whatever they wanted is a mistake, because there should have been some oversight from Twitch on the floor as a general floor manager, or booth manager, and the fact that the organizations themselves didn't shut it down is a mistake. Like, just the jumping in the ball pit concept could have been eliminated, and they could have had a plan B, certainly, to say no jumping, put up signs that say no jumping. This is now going to be a luxury den if people want to sit down and just relax, take a nap, something like that. Just no jumping, no disturbing, or just do nothing there and just make it like a weird art piece. Or you have a stacking contest with the foam cubes and you try to stack the cubes the highest, and then you offer just out of somebody's pocket $250, something like that, to the highest cube stacker. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you could certainly just on the fly think of something, and that really highlights where it's necessary to have somebody in charge that is a good on the fly thinker. That's the one thing a manager actually should have skill in and should actually justify their position with, is that when problems come up, they should be able to think of a solution or think of new ideas. And even when there aren't problems coming up, they should be thinking of new ideas and concepts. But I imagine most people who have ever dealt with a manager find them to not be very creative or very reactive on the fly, and instead they tend to be the most stuck in the mud and uncreative people you would ever find, and thus they are a hindrance to doing things or pivoting and making changes instead of being the driver to things. They are the brakes to the car. Managers often are, when they should be the engine, the accelerator pedal. Really, yeah, I guess they should be more the accelerator pedal, telling the workers who are the engines to go faster or go slower, not the brake pedal. Yeah, that's a great analogy, if I could say it better. Moving on, Need for Speed Unbound. The World is your canvas trailer, and screenshots are available. Which, yeah, the fact that there was some trailer leaks on World Need for Speed Unbound really has just proven how little effect trailer leaks are, or screenshot leaks actually are, because they just put out the official info trailers and screenshots, and it's exactly the same, and nobody really cared that the leaks came out a little bit earlier, and I don't think anybody is really less enthusiastic or more enthusiastic because of that. Cuphead Physical Edition launches December 6th. Meta has acquired Amateur Studio, Camouflage, and Twisted Pixel, which we already talked about that, so don't need to cover it again. Marvel's Iron Man VR is coming to Quest on November 3rd, which, at a certain level, I suppose this is the only way Meta is getting content is by actually acquiring the company Camouflage made the Iron Man game. But I don't think this trailer is going to do much to actually show you what the actual game is. If you're in VR, you're looking probably through the eyes of Tony Stark through the heads-up interface, I assume. Although that heads-up interface that is shown in the Marvel movies, I don't know if that's really heavily used in the comics as far as Marvel Iron Man, so you may not really have a heads-up interface at all in an Iron Man game. That was disappointingly awful as a announcement trailer. This game has been on PlayStation VR since November 3rd. There should be better footage to show. Okay, Bayonetta 3 has a Meet Viola gameplay breakdown. Viola is the name now for this girl who I have been seeing in the trailer and who I suspect is probably Bayonetta's true daughter from the future, compared to like the first game where there was a girl that looked a lot like she was going to be revealed to be Bayonetta's daughter, but turned out not to be Bayonetta's daughter. I'm bending over backwards to not spoil the events of Bayonetta 1. When you look at Bayonetta's appearance, I can't imagine that this is supposed to be a teenage Bayonetta from the past, which is also a possibility. Again, bending over backwards to not spoil the first game. Because Bayonetta has always been depicted as having black hair, not blonde hair. She's mostly had some kind of necklace that was more showing kind of a bigger lower necklace with more cleavage showing. The fact that she's wearing a t-shirt with a logo on it also kind of destroys that idea, and the leather necklace. In a lot of ways, I wouldn't be surprised if Viola is being pushed as the new character that Platinum Games wants to focus on instead of Bayonetta, and a new trilogy for the next generation of witches, Umbrian witches, potentially. She has a sword. Bayonetta doesn't use the sword. I'm not sure if there's guns here, if that's what this is supposed to be. Cleavage doesn't seem quite as big as Bayonetta's. She's got something on her boots, or potentially some weapons. There are definitely loadouts when playing Bayonetta 1 where where Bayonetta would have had swords on her feet and hands and used a sword. It's just never really been as interesting as the 4 guns. And arguably the loadouts in Bayonetta 1 were probably a mistake, and it should have just always been the 4 guns and only the 4 guns. Now, noticeably, Violet here is doing some kind of butterfly step, magical step, every time she steps. She just summoned a big teddy bear looking demon. She's fighting the same bad guys in Bayonetta 3. So, yeah. There's fairly obvious examples here in which she is able to do witch magic. She might not be an Umbrian witch, she might be a different kind of witch. She kind of has this kind of green color palette to her, and when she defeated that area and got the score, which looks like they may have sped up that sequence a little bit compared to Bayonetta 1 where that was a little slow. Yeah, when she got that score, a different kind of green logo loaded up. This world feels bigger compared to Bayonetta 1, and it definitely should be bigger. Apparently she's collecting some kind of frog-like creature. There's a very Chinese element to this, so it may be that she is some kind of more Chinese or Asian witch, although she doesn't really look that Asian. Um, whereas Bayonetta was more of this European type witch. And the whole world in Bayonetta is only slightly similar to the world in the real world. So something that feels vaguely European was the country that you were mostly in Bayonetta 1, but it didn't really equate to anything. Maybe Spain. So it was sort of like Spain. So there may be just a whole section of the world that's kind of Asian. But yeah, instead of staying on the ground like you would have done in Bayonetta 1 and gone in linear lines, it does seem like you are able to jump around more, find secrets, and you're going in bigger kind of arena areas. There's Lucas, who you would almost assume is the father of with Bayonetta, but maybe not. Maybe Lucas had this daughter somewhere else. And Lucas now, I think that's his name, feels like he is much more of a mobile, agile character. Like, he's still kind of a goofball, it seems like, as she's chasing after him, but he's trying to be a lot cooler than I think he was in the first game, and I think they're going to give him a little bit of due where he'll be a little bit cooler, but he'll still probably come off as mostly a goofball. Like, Lucas as a character kind of needs to be a lovable idiot and not just an idiot. If he is just an idiot, then people won't be interested in that. That's kind of an interesting transition there, where the floor broke as you're being attacked by these new creatures, which they kind of look like angels, but they have just a different art style to them. So what I would assume here is that, and I'm just watching the entire trailer here, so I hope the blur works, the Bayonetta 1, Bayonetta was fighting angels from heaven, or some kind of angels that were kind of like from a kind of heaven, not really a Christian heaven or Christian angels per se. And the second game, they were fighting demon-like creatures, and so we may now have a third, like, religious aspect to this, where it is more Asian demons or Asian angels or Asian deities. And at this point, the video has looped back around, so I imagine there's talk that's going over this that I'm not hearing. But I think specifically of the visuals, there's probably not anything new to see here. Yeah, it just looped around. Okay. They even say right here, Viola is an Umbra witch in training with a separate skill set from the seasoned Bayonetta. Bayonetta 3, by the way, due out for the Switch on October 28th. Moving on, we still got plenty of stuff to do. All Access Fall, Access spelled AKSYS, it has been set for October 20th, so that is effectively an announcement from Gematsu. Nico Golf Anime Golf launches in October for iOS and Android, which, yeah, I guess that would be nice if that worked, and as any kind of game for cell phones that's good, it would be great news. But it is already a niche game being a golf game, also having a somewhat niche art style of anime art styles added onto it, and being put in a niche platform of iOS and Android. It's called Shiro Nico Golf in Japan, which, okay. I can see why you would shorten the name just down to Nico Golf. Although, I feel like Nico being the word for cat in Japanese would imply that all of the characters would be cat ladies, cat guys even. And I'm not sure I really see that being the case. This kid's got some wild hair, but I don't see cats. And this lady doesn't have a tail. So I wouldn't be surprised if Shiro Nico means something completely different in Japanese, and shortening it to Nico loses its meaning. Which, at a certain point, maybe you should have just called it anime golf alone, but anime golf probably is too generic a term to copyright or advertise. Let's see. Bravely Default's producer Tomoya Asano has seemingly hinted at a remaster. Quote, "For now, it's unfortunately unable to announce anything like that. For now, let's just say." Which, yeah. Boy, is that a great way to say nothing and keep people excited around the idea that you said nothing. Because that's literally what they did. And at a certain point, this is not a news story. This is not news. At a certain point, it's getting dangerously close to straight up fake news, because all the person has done is said, "I cannot announce anything like that," and potentially misspoken by adding another sentence. Somebody that potentially just doesn't have media training or doesn't have a lawyer writing responses for them. But yeah, we are in the exact same situation 5 minutes ago that we are in now as far as Bravely Default, in that you should assume there is no remaster coming. You should have assumed that there's no remaster coming before then. Remasters may happen for all games in the future, certainly, but you cannot schedule your life around possibilities, maybes. Final Fantasy VII, The First Soldier, is going to end service on January 11th. We already talked about that. Relayer Advanced is coming to PC on October 27th. A free content update is coming to the PS5 and PS4 versions on November 18th. Now, this is from Dragami Games. Is this a visual novel game? No, it's a positional placement strategy RPG. Is it a game that's likely to run into any censorship problems on Steam? Well, you've got some kind of moe anime girls here. At this point, I'm also running into the point where even in my own mind, it's getting hard to tell the difference between moe, chibi, and kawaii. Which, yeah, this would be more kawaii animation style, now that I think about it. Yeah, I looked up some character sheets, and yeah, it would be really hard. I'm going to have to basically find specific examples of anime shows that I recognize and that I'm thinking about it, and it really is just going to be this personalized reference guide where I'm going to have like the Tenchi Muyo characters on display, and then try and use them as an example of what these art styles mean to me. And I may very well have to have a moe example from 1980s and then a different example from 1990s and 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, because even over the decades, those art styles have evolved. But yeah, I imagine this coming to Steam won't have any problems. Here, you've got a kid with a gun is not offensive to Steam. It's just if they're in a schoolgirl outfit, or if they possibly hint that they might at someday show any level of skin or have any romantic interest. Noticeably, these characters are also wearing these big jackets, so I just don't think they're going in that direction. But noticeably, also, you could say, well, Steam isn't going to have that kind of strict censorship regulations, and if anything, maybe Steam is relaxing its censorship rules. There is somebody out there that potentially would complain about somebody having pantyhose and mid-height skirts or mini skirts. There's really nothing else I think you could complain about, though. But definitely there are people out there that they would just be anti-skirt, and then there would be people out there that would be anti depicting women not covered head to toe in clothing. Of course, we really don't listen to the extreme, like, Iranian type rules. Otherwise, like, fortunately, we have not had a single character that was just put them in a hijab and cover them all the way down below their feet and don't show their hands and don't show their head, their face, or anything. Like, we haven't had that level of craziness. There probably has been a troll game that was made once or twice where there's a character just straight up in a hijab. But if there was actually any desire for anything like that, then you would see some kind of censorship mods getting made and released, and there just aren't. There, for games that do get mods, the vast majority of the mods have the characters showing more skin, not less. There's a certain balance that I think almost comes down to taste. I like Destiny Child's balance, where there could be mods that you put into Destiny Child as the mobile game I play. There are mods that will make a lot of the characters straight up naked with no clothing whatsoever, and that's just a little too extreme because the clothing is half the fun. The lewd, scantily clad appearances is more fun in most cases. I don't think there's a single mod for Destiny Child though that covers them up more. Most people are more than happy just to have the original Korean art, and they call that the uncensored mod, even though even in that there's a level of restraint that the artist chose to do, but it's pretty much the artist's own decision, so you really wouldn't call it censorship. And this is the censorship. This is the cannot speak. This is the rant that I said I'd probably have plenty of opportunities to get into, so let's not get too deep into it yet. We have about 4 more Gematsu articles. Witchfire Early Access has been delayed to early 2023 and is adding open world combat. Noticeably, I don't recognize a game called Witchfire. If anything, it may have been announced just on Monday and I already have forgotten it. Let's see. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet guessed the gym leader Iono's partner program trailer, which isn't Scarlet and Violet the new games, so how would you be able to guess the gym leader when you don't even know who they are? Now, noticeably, this character also seems like she has let's watch the Japanese trailer here for a second. She has this really big yellow coat on, which seems kind of weird, but it does look like that matches somewhat the weirdness of this character. Is this an effort to have a character that is almost like a VTuber from in the Pokemon universe? Seems like it. This coat she's wearing is gigantic. If you were going with real world proportions, the jacket she's wearing, which almost is like a straight jacket, would have to be for somebody that is, like, just looking at the neck circumference there, what are you talking, 50, 60 times bigger than this character? The bottom of what looks like a fairly short coat based on the arm length is covering all of her skirt completely. Her hands are stopping at about the halfway point as far as the length of these of this coat, and the bands at the end of the coat definitely come off as like a straitjacket. Now maybe there's some Japanese kimono type thing that would have bands on the end that would make this make a little bit more sense, but no, I don't think so. This is a really weird character design, which I guess Scarlet and Violet needed weird characters because the create your own custom characters are too generic and boring looking, and most of the other characters, even the gym leaders, are fairly generic and boring looking. And I assume she's just talking in a very high-pitched, possibly even shrill voice in Japanese. And her teeth are razors at times, which that's also an animation trick, certainly, to show a character being a little bit more mischievous or dangerous, is that to have sawtooth teeth or pointy teeth or a single vampire tooth sticking out. But when she fully closes her teeth and when they animate that, then it's just standard human teeth with square teeth. I vaguely recall seeing some video where they actively chose to only show the teeth of bad guys in a story, just as the subtle way of making you recognize this is a bad guy because you see him baring his teeth, and then all the good guys, they just didn't animate teeth at all, which is a thought, certainly. I don't know if that's something that actually would work, though, and it definitely wasn't adopted as a standard concept. The co-op zombie survival first-person shooter Project Z is going to be published by Modius Games for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. The game The Chant has a gameplay overview trailer. Is this part of the Dark Pictures anthology? Publisher Prime Matter and Brass Token as developer. So I don't think that is part of the Dark Pictures anthology. It's just a different kind of horror game. Kind of a horror adventure game. Looks like it is very possibly more of a game than the Dark Pictures anthology games that are normally easy. Anyways, in all ways, this will be like a great example of the type of game that could have been an Alone in the Dark game. I wouldn't be surprised if people compare this to something like Alan Wake also. And at a certain point, it might have enough elements that it would be even compared to something like The Last of Us, which, in a funny way, The Last of Us moves itself out of the category of being a horror stealth game because of the direction that its story goes into. This looks like a pretty creative horror game in which you're just not fighting a bunch of zombies. There seems to be some magic around it. There seems to be some puzzle solving, and some kind of magical lights. Alright, well, that looks interesting. Then the PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics lineup was also announced. So Komatsu has that article also. We already covered that. Alright. So Kamiwaza Way of the Thief is on Steam. It doesn't look like it's doing amazingly well as a game on Steam. You can see that there's a low polygon element to the visuals here, which may not have it work particularly well. It could also very well not play particularly well. That being said, it is, I think, a big enough title, or an interesting enough title, as a different looking game where you're playing as a Japanese thief in feudal times. It'd be interesting to see an anthropologist's take actually on the history of being a thief in Japanese feudal times, because it is kind of glorified occasionally in stories. So, and at a certain point, maybe that leads to the Yakuza gaining power later on, is that some crime was fairly glorified, and ninjas in a lot of ways, and the shoguns fighting for power is fairly glorified. There definitely isn't as much worship for law and order in the history of Japan as there is nowadays in Japan, where most people pretend in Japan to love the law and order and peaceful appearance of Japan, except for the Yakuza and the fact that everybody in Japan is effectively breaking the law by gambling at pachinko parlors or looking the other way. And certainly in Japan you cannot ignore the fact that there's a significant amount of people that are stealing panties or groping people on the train, a lot of guys groping girls. Not sure if so much of the opposite happens. And inside the family houses, I think there's probably a lot of abuse that should be illegal that happens in Japan. A lot of slapping, possibly a lot of incest, a lot of just in general mistreatment of people happening behind closed doors. And there's prostitution is rampant in Japan too, so with the soap lands. But then on the other hand, I don't think there's really that much more crime in Japan than anywhere else. It's just, it's hidden better. Like, I think there's just a significant amount of things that have been criminalized around the world that either need to be uncriminalized, such as prostitution, and regulated, or they or there's just a certain level of crime that's always going to happen. We have what I would definitely describe as a Western adult game, but actually in this case it supports English and Chinese. So this may be the first case where we have an adult game. It's called Love Formula, that maybe actually is made by a Chinese company. It's Western 3D models of guys and girls, and just, again, the screenshots are straight up hardcore pornography on them. It looks like it's really just a visual novel and nothing more, and really just feels like it's an asset flip. It's $5.09, so that again would be a tick in the Western adult game category for today. But we are also in a weird situation. This is just that number game where you match the numbers. Well, no, actually, I think this is probably ancient puzzle game of password cracking. So it's not 2048. It's guess the number, and if it's right and in the right position, it'll be green. If it's right but in the wrong position, it'll be yellow. So it's a Mastermind clone, although a lot more difficult than Mastermind, I would suspect, by the 9 different options or 10 different options here for numbers and only 5 guesses. So this would probably be an incredibly frustrating game. Yeah, I do believe the Golden Week, though, to get back to what I was saying, probably is going to reduce the number of Eastern games in general, whether they're adult in nature or otherwise. So, and I imagine we may just have fewer games. Anyways, this is an English and French game. What kind of game is it? Single player online co-op? 100% boss fight, 0% farming co-op game inspired by MMOs like World of Warcraft. If everything you fight is a boss, then none of them are a boss. Isn't that how that's going to boil down? The actual screenshots here just don't sell me on this game, though. It's kind of all over the place as far as here's an incredibly dark image with no heads-up display, so I have no idea what this is. It's probably a cutscene, and then you have a incredibly light outside image with a tons of heads-up display, and that just seems inconsistent to say the least. So I'm gonna just say no to that and be a little bit more harsh. This is a hidden object game. Dial clock. It's probably a horror asset flip game. It says it's coming soon with no release date, so I'm going to say no to that. Hausmeister. It's probably a joke asset flip game. Magic Tech. VR. Doesn't look like anything. Noise Box. Looks like it's English and Chinese. We're starting to see more of this now, where games are only being shown if it is more Chinese games are also claiming to support English. This next game is called Horny Witch Hunt, which, again, 3D models, although in this case they are flatter. They've been kind of flattened and they don't have the same level of lighting on them. And straight up pornography in the screenshots. And these definitely feel like asset flipped 3D models that have even less than average amounts of effort on them. It is $2.54 and it claims to be English only, so that's another tick in the Western game release. And I need a better word for it, certainly, because it really needs to be. I need to stop saying Western and Eastern, and I need to start saying 2D and 3D, because that's really what I'm looking for. Is it a 3D realistic model, or is it a 2D anime model? Because that's basically a different audience, although there is overlap. And I probably shouldn't even say 2D and 3D, because even that probably doesn't explain it best. I probably need to say realistic versus anime. That's really the core of what I'm trying to separate the two types of games by. Perhaps I've even tried to separate it by Western and Eastern to imply more that there's more like anti-Eastern, anti-Japanese sentiment in Steam than probably there ever is, or I bet there's not. They wouldn't think they have any anti-Japanese sentiment at all. Now this game Undecember is weird in that it's out, but it's mostly negative. So let's look at the reviews on this, because I would have given this a YouTube short. Hyped, installed, looked at the shop, used calculator, laughed, uninstalled, surprised, uninstall is free. Horrible, can't even make it. So when you change the hotkeys and the skill works properly, like how incompetent it is, it's literally non-excusable. It's not my PC, it's not my internet. I was able to use my skill perfectly fine on cue. The second you switch it to a mouse hotkey, you're not able to use it anymore. The cash shop prices are outrageous. You can barely afford 3 convenience stash tabs for $45 US. Alright. I don't know why this Russian language is reviewed as English or labeled as English. Okay, well, Undecember immediately loses a potential audience as a Diablo competitor just because of its poorly thought out free-to-playness of it. Plus a third-party DRM I'm sure didn't help either, but nobody even bothered to mention the third-party DRM. Master Chef Ice Cream Edition doesn't look like anything. Probably need to turn up the mouse acceleration in general on my mouse, because there are definitely some times where I want to just move my mouse an inch to get all the way to the top and the bottom of the screen, and like I'm going between 2 or 3 screens and going left and right, so yeah. But I wonder if that isn't just a case of my wrists are getting tired. This one says it's coming soon. Otherwise I may have put a follow on the trench. At a certain point though, I think I am just going to be cruel and reject things that just say coming soon. We have seen one game that said it was coming soon and then it actually did show up a couple days later, but that's been over the course of months of looking at new games. So next game we have here is called Sex Adventures Gangbang Surprise, and again it's realistic 3D models, and yep, I guess the theme in particular around this is gangbangs, but yeah, if you're gonna do a gangbang, I don't know what people are looking for there. Are you looking for different skin tones or vastly different appearances on the guys? Because really the guys look fairly similar, and honestly in the screenshot in which they are showing 3 guys, the 2 screenshots in which they're showing 3 guys and 1 girl there, 2 of the guys are just standing to the side, not interacting with the girl at all, because I bet these are 3D poses that have already been made and just being asset flipped. So that, as far as what you would be looking for in a gangbang, I imagine you want to have more interaction than that, and not just have 2 people standing to the side. It's English only. It's $2.24. That would be the 3rd game I think today in the realistic category, which I still am very much dismissing the general tally and count for this week and last week. But if this was not Golden Week or around Golden Week, I would be fairly concerned that we are seeing so many realistic style games and not getting any balance of the anime style adult games. This is just cut Fruit Ninja done worse. It is interesting that Fruit Ninja didn't officially ever come over to Steam, or if it did, it came and went without any fanfare. You would think if Fruit Ninja really was on Steam, it would go on sale occasionally and people would see it on the front page and it would be recommended. But nope, it doesn't seem like that's the case. So now for number 5, as far as realistic games, we have Save the Kingdom. Now the thing about Save the Kingdom is this was a game we've already saw because it was early access or coming soon. It's still early access for $6.99 English only, but it must have just been coming soon before. Why would an adult game be early access? I have no idea. Save the Kingdom also is the weird game that has a lot of furries, anthropomorphic animals, but also has humans. So it looks like it's dangerously close to being a bestiality game, which I wouldn't be surprised if Steam even knew about this game, which I suspect they probably don't really even know about this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they did put out some rule that said, hey, no, you can't have bestiality. You can't be both furries and realistic 3D models of humans in the same room at the same time, even, or interacting the same. Like, there definitely is a screenshot here where there's a tiger character approaching a bed with a human looking lady on the bed in a negligee nightwear, which that definitely gives a lot of implication. XP Soccer here is coming soon, so I'll wait till it actually comes. That's actually, it's been a lot of adult games this Wednesday in general, so I almost wonder, again, if there isn't some level of bundling that's happening where all the realistic style adult games are getting released potentially every 2 weeks on Wednesday, and maybe that's it, maybe it isn't. Interesting. This game here, called The Lost Village, looked like a standard horror game, but there's a screenshot here with maybe what are supposed to be mannequins, but really do just look like naked women, and that just came out of nowhere, because every other screenshot really suffers from dark screenshot syndrome and has nothing to show, and it really makes the game look awful. Noticeably also, this game doesn't have any mature content warnings and isn't in the adult category or adult section of Steam. Yeah, one of the things I definitely wanted to set up was effectively like a dump button or a blur button that retroactively would blur video. I don't know if there's really a way to do that. I think I've asked for some kind of feature for OBS like that, but OBS inherently doesn't even have a blur button by default, or a blur effect that you could toggle on and on with a quick key, let alone something that could delay all the video by like 30 seconds and then let you press a button and say, let's dump this footage or let's blur this footage live. And it would be too much of a hassle, frankly, to pre-record these videos and then upload them and get them out, and it would lose all the potential live stream elements. Although seems like we haven't had anybody on the chat in the past couple of streams, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of that doesn't come down to the holidays and winter approaching, fall and winter approaching. Let's see if this is an adult game. Nope. And you run into that danger too, where anything that's just kind of badly animated might be an adult game. This witch character made me think maybe it was an adult game, but it isn't. It's just a cheap Halloween thing. And yeah, we definitely are more and more not talking about let me see if this one is YouTube family friendly in the screenshots. Not talking about other kinds of games, because there's just never been anything to really talk about a lot of these games. Milk Girl's Sweet Memories of Summer is tagged as having sexual content. Undoubtedly, fairly obviously, there is probably a patch in which this chart would reveal more cleavage, and that this is almost certainly a game around a character that is very big breasted. Although it mostly seems like it is kind of a hidden object game. They're calling it an action adventure game. And maybe that is an adventure game. I don't see how it could be an action game. It is full Japanese audio, 1349, and it definitely would be in the category of an Asian animated style experience, but noticeably the mature content says it just has sexual jokes, and that's it. And there's no DLC on this to uncensor it, so you almost certainly would have to find an uncensored patch. I wouldn't be surprised if the uncensored patch literally just depicts this character as being showing more cleavage or being topless while still doing fairly generic, boring actions. And I'm being fairly generous even calling this an anime style game, because when you really look at it, it's a slightly anime style 3D model that's fairly off model of what you're seeing here. The hair color is completely different, the haircut is different, the shirt she's wearing is different, the eyes are a different color, the eyes are more narrow here. This is a completely different character than what's being shown here. And even here, you do have brown hair, whereas this is more blue. Maybe that's the lighting that they're trying to imply. But then everything else is still different. So it'd be hard to really call that an adult game and say we even have one anime style adult game today. This Stranded Alien Dawn game, I'm not sure what it is. Planet Survivor Sim, where I guess you're farming and building a facility. I'm going to give this a YouTube short, but I'm not going to bother to put it on the follow list because it's not my style of game. Cracked looks like it's a frustration platformer game, so I'm going to say no to that. And in that case, I'm not even going to bother to give it a YouTube short. Here we have a VR game called Aggression, which aggression is just leaving a room. It's a fancy old word for exit. And it's in VR, so for that reason I'll give it a follow. Do I need to spotlight VR games though? No. At this point I'm not going to do that. We have a game called Relapse, which is apparently a deck builder roguelike game. It feels like it's a game that can be very much all over the place as far as maybe using pre-made visuals and assets. This character is intriguing certainly, but doesn't really match these 3D models, and I'm not sure it really matches the cards either. But I'll give it a follow. In a lot of ways, this art style is almost reminiscent of an early 90s art style of a fantasy cartoon. So it's not just the belly showing. It is the lack of lines in the hair and lack of lines in the skin, and minimal shadowing, but some shadowing. It almost comes off a little comic booky too. We have a game called You Are the Dinner, which is a zombie game. I'll give it a follow, give it a chance. It's probably not something I'd want to play. Like, at a certain point, this almost is a beat 'em up game, and this is a character that's playing right now. It's actually convincing me to remove it from the follow list. Yeah, a zombie game could be made as a beat 'em up game, but I feel like if you were going to do that, then you're going to have to write an interesting story where somebody is just going to punch zombies over and over again. But that does help you eliminate the need for having gangs be the bad guys in beat 'em up games. Unfortunately, it also ruins the concept of a beat 'em up game in that different looking characters tended to have different actions. So you would need like fast zombies, slow zombies. They need to look very very different and move differently and actually fight differently. And at a certain point, for the amount of variety of enemies you would want in a beat 'em up game, there aren't that many varieties of zombies. So it's very possible people have thought of that and it hasn't worked. Here we have a game called My Bloody Weekend, which looks like a full motion video with QuickTime events. I'll make a YouTube short on that. Always interesting. Well, this was My Bloody Weekend for $1.99 English full audio, and this is My Blood Weekend for $1.99 English full audio. So I just have two of the same things. Maybe that's because my macro messed up because I hadn't clicked the plus button to make the tabs overplay each other. Lego Brick Tales is, I guess, now available. That was already on my follow list, but it is just out right now, so there's no user reviews on it. Yeah, and again, I guess if somebody was to friend me on Steam and gift me this game, that would be something that I'd love to play. And if I could get it done in the next 24 hours, I would live stream that whole series. Particularly now that my channel is really only releasing one show, live streaming entire gameplays of smaller games, if they're brand new, is a possibility a lot more. No longer do I really feel the need to make a bunch of content to schedule it far in the future, because I effectively cut my work in half by only having one series pre-recorded, released on my channel anyways. So yeah, that's definitely something I should think about. Unfortunately, I already just spent a bunch of things on the Prime Day sale, so buying a game on Steam doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's part of the problem, is that every time there is a Steam sale, it doesn't make the most amount of sense. This Time Melters might be something, so I'll give it a follow in a YouTube short. After the Rain, or Opry Lapley. I don't know if I want to say this is a bad art style with the black eyes, or if this is just a different art style. It's coming soon. It's English full audio. It seems to support several other European languages. Yeah, I'm not certain if there's a game here or not. But you know what? It's coming soon. It doesn't have a release date. At this point, I don't want to put coming soon games on the fall list, because that is really going to be a nightmare when I start doing fall list cleanups and there's games that just say coming soon, and they've been saying coming soon for years, potentially. You'll just never have that number to file things under or filter things with. So same is true for Quiz Whiz here. Dungeon Liberator. Is this single player? I think this game is probably more multiplayer focused, and it does kind of look like a Chinese game, although at a certain point I'm just saying it looks like a Chinese game because it supports Chinese language, and I shouldn't just eliminate a game just because it supports the Chinese language. This doesn't really look like a Chinese game at all. I was wrong. I misspoke, certainly. Like, what I think of when I say Chinese game is usually absolute bottom of the barrel garbage. This looks like a fine mid-tier game at least. It's just not my kind of game per se, and it's multiplayer focused. Nothing there worth mentioning. And then this seems to just be a puzzle game. Alright, so we're at our GameDeveloper.com articles now. We already talked about Iron Man, Meta acquiring those companies. The MetaQuest Pro launches on October 25th for a whopping $1,500. That is ridiculously expensive. Is there anything possible that this offers to justify that price? It's geared more toward business and professional types rather than casual people. The new headset would encourage collaborations and creativity during virtual meetings. I don't believe that in a second. The thing is, particularly Meta would have to be the test bed to say, hey, VR actually does work amongst our employees, and we're doing virtual meetings using the MetaQuest Pro, and it actually makes sense, and it does remote work, and it makes for a more efficient experience. And I just don't believe that that's true. Even if it was true, I don't think it's $1,500 true per user. $1,500 per user. So if you were going to do a meeting with just 3 people, you're talking $4,500 in that case, when you can just install Zoom for free and do Zoom meetings and have cameras. And even if you had to buy people brand new computers that they would probably use for other things, and buy them cameras because the computers didn't have cameras, instead of getting them laptops with cameras built in, and get them internet, it's still going to be more efficient and cheaper to do all of that than giving them a $1,500 VR headset. I'm really in a scenario where VR might be helpful if it was a bunch of doctors, for instance, looking over a 3D scanned patient, and they were practicing what the surgery was going to be. Even in those cases, that's probably not the best way to do that at all. Or if they were for some reason collaborative sculptors, and they were sculpting a big block of clay together, wouldn't you want hands-on experience with that too? Like, yeah, none of it really makes sense. If you were programming a robotic arm to do a surgery, maybe then you would put VR gloves and VR headsets on every surgeon in the world that you can get, and then having them perform the surgery in virtual reality, and then each of those movements being scanned by the robotic arm, so that it can do what the best version of that surgery is. Although really that would just be the average version of that surgery. Maybe it would make sense there, but even then it probably doesn't. It's not magic, or really even a form of art when doctors are doing surgery. There is a point A and a point B at which a scalpel should cut, and it's just that simple, and that you can hand program those instructions more than learning by observing the actions of a doctor. Moving on, we already talked about the xCloud gaming coming to the Meta Quest, which this is probably the first case of xCloud gaming coming to a different platform completely. Almost certainly the streaming stick will be announced fairly quickly too, as an option. And apparently even Bing and Microsoft Edge can launch Xbox Cloud gaming titles. I don't know what they mean by Bing though. Bing is their search engine. So are they saying that there are specific links when you search something in Bing that would then launch the Xbox app on a PC? Or launch Edge browser to stream it through the Edge browser? That's probably more what it's talking about. And I guess if you type Bing into Chrome and click on the links, there's some thought that even that would potentially work. But this is really an example of Microsoft just trying to remind people that Edge and Bing exist and get some free advertisement and cross promotion. And arguably GameDeveloper.com should have not been suckered in to that kind of a hype and advertisement, blatant advertisement, enough to write an article about it, because certainly there's no relevancy around Edge or Bing. Square Enix is going to scrap Final Fantasy VII's The First Soldier just after a year. We already talked about that. UK regulators say Activision Blizzard's deal could give Microsoft, quote, unparalleled advantage in key markets, which is somewhat fair to say that. It could, notice the could here, really give them a significant advantage in the streaming market compared to the Nintendo Switch that doesn't really have streaming, and the PlayStation, which is mediocre at streaming. And that is probably the only debate that would really justify not approving the acquisition, is that Xbox Game Pass is by far the only successful service in streaming games specifically. I don't know if it's really that much more successful than PlayStation Network in digital distribution, and if you are talking digital distribution, you have to throw Steam in there, at which point Steam has a major advantage under that category. And streaming almost certainly is the future for a lot of gamers. So they are very future leaning or looking there. And of course you have to get down to, is it fair to stop somebody from gaining an advantage when they've done nothing to stop PlayStation or Nintendo from trying to compete in that category? Because at a certain point, I don't want to be on the side of capitalism here, but unfortunately I'm going to have to make an argument in that vein. But at a certain point, Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard and adding it to its streaming service is Microsoft competing better and offering a better product to the end user. It does nothing to interfere with or reduce the opportunities of PlayStation or Nintendo to be better at streaming games themselves. They've just not bothered to get better at doing that. And if there was a risk of them interfering with Nintendo or PlayStation being better at streaming games, then the UK regulators really should just make them sign an agreement to say they're not going to have any kind of streaming exclusive games, and that they're going to license out all of the games from Activision Blizzard to Nintendo and PlayStation in a fair and equitable manner, just for 10 years or so, probably not forever. Let's see. Moving on, FIFA 23 passes 10.3 million players to set a launch week record. I guess FIFA was way more popular. This is interesting that they are showing the women's teams playing as a screenshot. I don't know if I need to do some research, certainly, to figure out if women's football, women's soccer, as we'd call it in the United States, is popular at all in the UK and Europe, and or just in general, because it definitely doesn't seem like it's that popular, and I know they don't get paid as much, and I think some of their pay is tied to ticket sales, but they don't get promoted, so the ticket sales also, I imagine, are lower. There also, I believe, was a story that came out around FIFA that there was just a rampant amount of abuse, sexual harassment, assault, and just general nastiness happening in FIFA amongst the managers and coaches and the female players. Yeah, I wouldn't. It was kind of a shocking amount of allegations where, yeah, almost certainly some of that existed, and I imagine some of it even exists in the male players too, but the amount of accusations was fairly high. Although in the past I have definitely warned people away from believing some accusations just because they were able to compile 1,001 other complaints, particularly if you're not going to bother to go through each complaint and try and verify how many of these complaints are legitimate or even really an issue. I wouldn't be surprised amongst the complaints if there isn't a coach that is used to coaching guys and inappropriately assaulting them sexually by slapping them on the butts, and he just transitioned to coaching girls and is now inappropriately sexually assaulting them by tapping them on the butts. The whole tapping on the butts in American football, in NFL, and all of that is ridiculously high. And there really just needs to be like major fines on it. Frankly, the coach physically contacting the player in any way below the belt should probably be a fine on the coach, or anybody physically contacting a player below the belt outside of the field of play should probably be finable, red cardable, something like that. Let's move on. Moving on, CD Projekt confirms that Cyberpunk 2077 players can salvage Stadia saves. Players will be able to bring their saves to PC and console platforms, which I guess at that point this is a promise, less than it really is an explanation as to how you would actually do that. Okay. So now I need to turn off the plus button. And man, haven't fixed the mini player anyways. Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate. We're at the W's as far as the wish list fall list cleanup. It's rated very positively. It's from 2022. I guess that means it goes on the wish list and take it off the fall list. I think at a certain level, Warhammer games, if they're good, are going to end up on the wish list, and then I probably will never buy it. This looks like this is a beat 'em up game where you play as anthropomorphic dogs it's relatively positive, really positively reviewed, but it's not really relevant at only 23 reviews. And yeah, there's not really anything here I see that would deserve to go on the follow list, on the wish list. Wardens needs more time. Wardens open twice. I don't know why we have so many duplicates happening here. Seems almost like I'm getting double clicks. Warage is mixed. For Mongrel, it's rated very positively, but overall is mixed. Very positive in the last 30 days. So this may be a case where it just had such a bad launch that if I give it more time even, and it continues to get 88% positive reviews with 23 reviews, it would just never pull the reviews up to 75%. So they may have just had a really bad launch. And that seems to definitely be the case when they're saying polished edition 19.09. So in this case, really the only thing I could do is just leave it on the follow list, and that makes sense. And then War Mines, World War II. It's a Minesweeper game, I think, with an attempt to be more of a realistic appearance. I don't think a game around the concept of mines is even something I would want to play, though. Mines are awful, and that's why every place in the world except for the United States has promised to stop using them. So yeah, I'm gonna get rid of that. War Island, a co-op adventure, probably means I can't play it. Also, it's from 2020 and only has 13 user reviews. I wish we saw more Native American looking characters in games, but it doesn't happen. This is also early access. It doesn't look terrible, but I don't think I can support this and leave it on the follow list. You know what, I'm going to make an executive decision and give it more time, but it really does not deserve it at 2022. You really have to bend over and backwards and say, well, maybe they're still working on this, but COVID slowed them down, and maybe there's real experience here. The idea that it has online co-op is probably a horrible idea that's going to hurt this game. War Hospital says Q3 2023, which really means I should take it off the follow list until it actually comes out. There. Wanted Raccoon, where you play as a raccoon in early access. Yeah, there is a potential game here where you run around and make mischief as a raccoon. It also seems like there might be even more of a narrative and more of a story here. It does seem like it is a almost Goat Simulator physics engine hijinks game, and doesn't look amazingly well visually polished, but I think the hijinks make up for that. So yeah, I'll leave it on the fall list and see if it ever comes out of early access. I wouldn't be surprised though if it actually never comes out of early access. Let's see, we have a adult game here that has no relevancy. It's not even being reviewed particularly well. It's a linear choice-free visual novel. It's a kinetic visual novel. Interesting, they say 0 out of 10 and then they give it a thumbs up as a review. So yeah, we don't need irrelevant visual novels. even if they maybe have some adult content in it. I'm not really sure if they do. Non-explicit depictions of sexual behavior, possibly including partial nudity, mild provocative text and materials. And I'm stumbling over words today. And then Wanderer. Is this a VR game only? No. Built from the ground up for VR, unique blend of escape room style puzzles. Says it needs VR, but I don't see any confirmation you have to actually play it in VR. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this game is a collection of experiences in VR, but it's not tagged as VR or requiring VR. And so for that one reason, I think I'm going to remove it from the follow list. Because I'm going to accidentally put this on the wish list and buy it and then realize I don't have a VR headset if I don't. So for their lack of proper labeling and just saying VR supported, I'm going to say no. Even if it actually can be played without VR, it's so focused on VR that it's not realistic to say yes to that anyways. Alright, well, let's set up one of these, because I always have to do one more of those, and then I'm going to scroll down my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news worth talking about. And then that's going to be it for this stream. Probably I'm not going to get a lot done over the next couple days, today and tomorrow. So Friday I'll probably have little to report as far as the accountability section too. Yeah, I'm not anticipating this to be a particularly productive week at this point. And now that I've also bought a bunch of stuff to fix my irrigation system, that means I'm going to have to fairly quickly start working on that, which that means there's at least another week, if not 2 or more, in which I'm going to have to work on that. Apparently Ridge Racer 2 was announced for PlayStation Plus Premium Classics. Has the video announcing that has been taken down, so apparently it was announced and then taken down, so they either are not ready to announce it, or something else happened. Yeah, that Marvel Midnight Suns is still trying to advertise itself without really telling me what it is. I'm still not sure. The Switch version of this game, Coda Princess, is getting second print copies. This was the PC game that had a fairly scantily clad character with a big lady with a big sword. Although I'm not sure there was much other to see in the game than the kind of barbarian armor, scantily clad armor. Man, these live views, when you have to watch a game play out, it's too slow. And it's not like I'm ever paying any attention to them, so I'm personally not learning anything from it. And I'm already through my news, so there's like nothing. The only news article here worth mentioning is that Dark Alliance developer has rebranded to Invoke Studios and announced a Dungeons and Dragons game. It's probably smart to not use a name like Dark Alliance as your studio. Dungeons and Dragons still have people who believe it's devil worship. A new Dungeons and Dragons game, in theory, is intriguing. In practical effect, is probably not that interesting, depending on how it actually is implemented. Yeah, and still didn't get all the daily quests done. Still went 3 hours and 21 minutes. The only thing I guess I can be somewhat proud of is that I didn't end up pausing the stream and going to the bathroom, which I've been doing a lot of that lately too. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to further follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and give me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.